My mother-in-law told the nurses. I was an unfit mother. While I was still in labor, she filed for emergency custody before my daughter was even born, but what she didn't know was that I'd been recording everything for months, the look on her face. When the judge played back her own voice saying, "That baby belongs with me, not some unstable girl," was worth every sleepless night. I'd spent gathering evidence. My name is Sarah Chun, and 8 months ago I married into what I thought was a loving family. I had no idea I was walking into a carefully planned trap designed to steal my child before she was even born. Before we continue, I want to thank you for being here. If you believe that new mothers deserve protection, not predators, please consider subscribing. It's free and helps us reach more women who need to hear this now. Let's see how this nightmare unfolded. It started the moment David and I announced our engagement. His mother, Margaret, had this way of smiling that never reached her eyes. "How wonderful," she said, gripping my hand just a little too tightly. David's always been such a good judge of character. The wedding planning was my first red flag. Margaret insisted on approving every detail from the flowers to the guest list. "I just want everything to be perfect for my son," she'd say whenever I questioned her involvement. David thought it was sweet that his mother cared so much. "She's just excited," he'd tell me when I mentioned feeling overwhelmed. "She lost Dad 5 years ago. David's all she has left." I felt guilty for resenting her involvement. After all, she was paying for half the wedding. The comments started subtle at first. "Are you sure that dress is flattering, dear?" Or David's father would have wanted something more traditional, but they escalated quickly, especially when we announced the pregnancy. "Pregnant already," Margaret said when we told her the news at Sunday dinner. Her fork paused halfway to her mouth. "How far along?" When I said 8 weeks. She calculated quickly in her head. "So this happened for the wedding." David squeezed my hand under the table. "Mom, we're married now. That's what matters." But Margaret's expression had already shifted to something colder, more calculating. "Of course, dear. I'm just surprised you didn't wait to get settled first." That night, David and I had our first real fight about his mother. "She's judging me," I told him. "She thinks I trapped you with this pregnancy." David shook his head. "You're being paranoid, Sarah. Mom's just old-fashioned." But I wasn't paranoid. Margaret's behavior became increasingly invasive. She'd show up unannounced to check on me during my pregnancy, always with some excuse about bringing groceries or helping with housework. "You look tired, dear," she'd say, scanning our apartment with disapproving eyes. "Are you taking your vitamins, eating enough protein? David works so hard, he needs a wife who can take care of herself." The nursery became a battleground. Margaret had opinions about everything: the crib placement, the paint color, even the mobile. I'd chosen babies need stimulation. She'd lecture, but not overstimulation. "This room is far too busy." She started bringing her own baby items, just in case. A car seat for her house, baby clothes in newborn sizes. "Since you probably bought everything too big, a bassinet for when the baby visits." "Grandma," David didn't see the problem. "She's excited about being a grandmother," he'd say when I complained. What's wrong with her wanting to help? But it didn't feel like help. It felt like preparation, like she was setting up her own nursery. The turning point came during my baby shower. Margaret had insisted on hosting it at her house. "I have more space," she argued. "And I know all the best caterers," I agreed, thinking it would make her feel included. The shower was beautiful. Margaret had spared no expense. Elegant decorations, expensive catering, a guest list that included women I'd never met, friends of the family. She called them all older women who looked at me with polite skepticism during the gift opening. Margaret positioned herself beside me, opening cards and making comments. "Oh, how practical," or "Well, that's interesting." She seemed to be cataloging everything, taking mental notes. Then came the moment that changed everything. One of Margaret's friends, an elderly woman named Dorothy, asked about my birth plan. "Are you planning to breastfeed, dear?" she asked with genuine concern. "Of course," I replied. "My doctor says it's best for the baby." Dorothy nodded approvingly, but Margaret's expression darkened. "Well, we'll see how that goes," she said with a tight smile. "Not every woman can manage it." "Sarah's very determined," David said loyally, but Margaret continued. "Determination isn't always enough. Sometimes the baby's needs have to come first." The room feels silent, everyone sensing the tension that night. I couldn't sleep. Something about Margaret's comment bothered me. The way she'd said, "We'll see," like she was planning something. I started paying closer attention to her behavior. Margaret began making comments about my fitness as a mother. "You seem stressed, dear. Stress isn't good for the baby." Or, "Are you sure? You're eating enough, you look thin." Always in front of David, always with concern that sounded genuine. She started documenting things too, taking photos of our apartment when it was messy, commenting on my appearance. "You look exhausted, Sarah, maybe. You should see a doctor." She'd say this in front of witnesses. The real alarm bells started ringing when Margaret began asking about my family history. "Any mental illness on your side, dear?" she'd ask casually. "Depression, anxiety, these things can be hereditary." When I mentioned that my mother had struggled with postpartum depression after my birth, Margaret's eyes lit up. Oh, how concerning. Did she require hospitalization? I felt like I was being interviewed for a job I didn't want. David dismissed my concerns. "She's just worried about you," he'd say. Mom's always been protective, but protective felt like the wrong word. Predatory seemed more accurate. I started keeping a journal documenting Margaret's visits, her comments, her behavior. I told myself I was being paranoid, but something deep in my gut told me to pay attention. The comments escalated as my due date approached. "I hope you're prepared for how difficult this will be," Margaret would say. "New mothers often struggle more than they expect, especially young ones." She started bringing articles about postpartum depression, stories about mothers who couldn't cope. "Just so you know what to watch for," she'd say, leaving the clippings on our coffee table. Then came the conversation that made everything clear. I was 37 weeks pregnant, exhausted from a difficult night's sleep, when Margaret arrived unannounced with coffee and pastries. "I've been thinking," she said, settling into our kitchen chair, "about after the baby comes, you're going to need help, especially if you struggle like your mother did." I stiffened, but let her continue. "I think it would be best if you and the baby stayed with me for the first few weeks," she said, stirring her coffee casually. "Just until you get your bearings. David could visit after work, of course." "That's very kind," I said carefully, "but I think we'll manage fine here." Margaret's smile tightened. "Oh, dear, I don't think you understand how overwhelming a newborn can be, especially for someone with your family history." "My family history," I repeated, and Margaret nodded gravely. "The depression, dear, often skips generations, but when it appears, it can be quite severe. Sometimes mothers need to be protected from themselves." That's when I realized what was happening. Margaret wasn't planning to help with the baby. She was planning to take the baby. She was building a case for my unfitness as a mother, using my own family history against me. That night, I told David everything. His initial reaction was denial. "Mom would never do that," he said. "You're misinterpreting her concern." But when I laid out the pattern of behavior, his face grew pale. The comments about my mental health, the documentation, the insistence on the baby staying at our house. I said, "David, she's building a case against me." He was quiet for a long time, processing. "What do you want me to do?" he finally asked, and I knew then that I couldn't count on him to protect me. Margaret had spent 30 years training him to see her as the ultimate authority. That's when I made the decision that would save my daughter's life. I started recording everything, not just writing in my journal, but actually recording Margaret's visits, her phone calls, her comments. I bought a small digital recorder and kept it in my pocket during every interaction with Margaret. I also installed a recording app on my phone for calls. The laws in our state allowed single-party consent. Recording the recordings were devastating. Margaret's true personality emerged when she thought no one was listening. "That girl has no idea what she's gotten herself into," she told someone on the phone. "David's always been too trusting, but I know what's best for this family," she continued. "That baby deserves better than some unstable girl who got pregnant to trap my son." I recorded her telling David's aunt, "I've been documenting everything, her mood swings, her inability to keep house properly when the baby comes. I'll have everything. I need to prove she's unfit." The most damning recording came when Margaret thought I was napping upstairs. She was on the phone with someone discussing legal strategy. "Grandparents' rights are stronger than people think," she said, "especially when the mother has a history of mental illness. I've been building the case for months, photos, documentation, witness statements. When that baby is born, I'll be ready." I realized then that Margaret had been planning this since the moment we announced. The pregnancy, every comment, every visit, every seemingly helpful gesture had been calculated. I consulted a family law attorney without telling David or Margaret. The lawyer listened to my recordings, and her face grew grim. "This is a serious situation," she said. "Your mother-in-law is building a custody case. Can she do that?" I asked, and the lawyer nodded. "Grandparents' rights vary by state, but if she can prove you're unfit, she might have a case, especially if your husband supports her." We developed a counter strategy. I would continue recording while also documenting my own fitness. As a mother, prenatal appointments, parenting classes, financial stability, everything met proved. I was prepared. The lawyer also advised me to have witnesses to Margaret's behavior, people who could testify to her manipulation and controlling tendencies. I started inviting friends over when Margaret visited my friend. Jessica was shocked by what she witnessed. "She's not helping you," Jessica said after one particularly tense visit. "She's undermining you, making you doubt yourself," I recorded Margaret telling Jessica. "Sarah's so young and inexperienced. I worry about her ability to handle a baby, especially with her family's mental health issues." Jessica later told me, "I've never seen anything like it. She was trying to get me to agree that you seemed unstable. It was like she was building a case right in front of me." As my due date approached, Margaret's behavior became more aggressive. She started making demands rather than suggestions. "I'll be in the delivery room, of course," she announced. "Someone needs to advocate for the baby." When I said I wanted only David in the room, Margaret's mask slipped completely. "This isn't about what you want, dear. This is about what's best for my grandchild." "Your grandchild?" I repeated, and Margaret nodded firmly. "David's child, my blood, my responsibility, especially if you're not capable of making good decisions." I recorded that conversation too, along with her threat. "If you try to keep me away from my grandchild, I'll have no choice but to take legal action to protect that baby from an unfit mother." Labor started at 3 a.m. on a Tuesday, David, and I rushed to the hospital while Margaret followed in her own car. I'd already alerted the hospital staff about the situation, and my lawyer was on standby during labor. Margaret tried to take control. "She needs an epidural," she told the nurses. "She's not handling the pain well." When I refused, she became agitated. "She's not thinking clearly." I recorded her telling a nurse, "I'm concerned about her mental state. She's been very unstable during the pregnancy. I think someone should evaluate her fitness as a mother." The nurse looked uncomfortable. "Ma'am, that's not really our place to determine." But Margaret persisted. "I have documentation of her erratic behavior. I think child services should be contacted." That's when I knew Margaret was making her move. She wasn't waiting for me to fail as a mother. She was trying to have me declared unfit before I even became one. My daughter, Emma, was born at 2:47 p.m. beautiful, healthy, perfect. As they placed her on my chest, I felt a love so fierce it took my breath away, but I also felt fear because I knew Margaret was just getting started within hours. Margaret was making demands. "I need to hold her," she said, reaching for Emma. "She needs to bond with her grandmother." When I hesitated, she became aggressive. "Don't be selfish, Sarah," I recorded her telling David. "Your wife is being possessive with the baby. It's not healthy. She needs to learn to share." She made it sound like I was being unreasonable for wanting to hold my own newborn the next morning. Margaret arrived early with a car seat. "I'm taking Emma home with me for a few hours," she announced. "You need rest and I need bonding time with my granddaughter." When I refused, Margaret's voice turned cold. "Sarah, you're being irrational. This is exactly the kind of behavior I've been documenting. You're not thinking clearly." She pulled out her phone and started recording. For the record, Sarah is refusing to let the baby's grandmother provide care. She seems agitated and possessive. But I was recording too, and I had months of evidence of Margaret's manipulation. Her planning her threats that afternoon. My lawyer filed an emergency restraining order. The hearing was scheduled for the next day. Margaret arrived with her own lawyer and a thick folder of evidence against me, photos of our messy apartment, witness statements about my erratic behavior. But when my lawyer played the recordings, Margaret's face went white. The judge listened to her own voice, plotting to take my baby, discussing my Unfitness, planning legal strategy. Mrs. Patterson, the judge said sternly. These recordings suggest you've been deliberately undermining this young mother's confidence. While building a custody case against her, Margaret tried to defend herself. Your Honor, I was only concerned about the baby's welfare, but the judge had heard enough. Your own words contradict that claim, Mrs. Patterson. The restraining order was granted. Margaret was prohibited from contacting me or Emma without court supervision. David was devastated. I can't believe Mom would do this, he said, but the recordings didn't lie. Margaret had spent months planning to steal our daughter using my family history against me, documenting every moment of weakness or vulnerability. The most chilling recording was played last. Margaret talking to her lawyer about long-term strategy. Once I have custody, I can move to Florida with the baby. The mother will have limited visitation rights. She had planned to take Emma across the country away from me, permanently using grandparents' rights as a weapon to destroy our family. The judge was visibly disturbed. Mrs. Patterson, your behavior constitutes harassment and manipulation of a new mother. The judge ruled, you are prohibited from any contact with the minor child or the mother for a period of 1 year. Margaret's lawyer tried to argue, but the evidence was overwhelming. Months of recordings documenting her predatory behavior, her manipulation, her calculated cruelty outside the courthouse. Margaret finally showed her true face. You think you've won, she hissed at me, but I'll never stop fighting. For my granddaughter, you're not fit to be her mother. I recorded that too, her final threat captured on audio for any future legal proceedings. David heard it and finally understood what his mother really was. The aftermath was painful. David struggled with the reality of his mother's behavior. I keep thinking about all the times she said she was just trying to help. He told me, was any of it real? We started family therapy to deal with the trauma Margaret had inflicted on our marriage. David had to learn to see his mother's manipulation for what it was. She trained me to doubt myself. He realized during one session, whenever I questioned her, she'd make me feel guilty for not trusting her love. Margaret violated the restraining order twice, once by sending gifts to Emma through a third party, once by showing up at our pediatrician's office just to check on the baby. Each violation was documented and reported. Margaret's lawyer advised her to stop. You're making things worse for yourself, but she couldn't help herself. The gifts she sent were revealing baby clothes in the wrong size, as if she didn't know Emma's actual measurements, toys inappropriate for a newborn's age, everything chosen to suggest I wasn't caring for Emma properly. I kept everything as evidence of Margaret's continued attempts to undermine my parenting. Even from a distance, she was still trying to build a case against me. 6 months later, Margaret's year-long restraining order was extended. After she was caught taking photos of our house and following me to the grocery store with Emma, the judge was not amused. Mrs. Patterson, your obsession with controlling this child's life borders on stalking. You need professional help, not access to this family. Margaret was ordered to undergo psychological evaluation and anger management counseling before any future contact with Emma could be considered. The evaluation revealed what I'd suspected all along. Margaret had narcissistic personality disorder with controlling and manipulative tendencies. The psychologist recommended no unsupervised contact with Emma. David finally went no contact with his mother. I can't have someone in my life who tried to steal my daughter. He told her in a final phone call that I recorded, you chose her over your own mother. Margaret screamed, I gave you everything and you're throwing it away for some girl who trapped you with a baby. She didn't trap me, Mom, David said quietly. You tried to trap her, you tried to steal our child. I can't forgive that. He hung up and blocked her number. Emma is now 18 months old, healthy, happy, completely unaware of the battle that was fought for her right to stay with her parents. She babbles and laughs and fills our home with joy. Margaret has made no further contact, though my lawyer advised me to keep the recording equipment handy. Women like her don't give up easily. She warned, they just get more creative. I still have nightmares sometimes about what would have happened if I hadn't recorded Margaret's behavior, if I trusted that her concern was genuine. The recordings saved my family. They proved that a grandmother's love can become a grandmother's obsession. That family doesn't always mean safety, David, and are stronger now we've learned to trust our instincts to protect our nuclear family from anyone who tries to harm it, even if they share our blood. I kept every recording, every piece of evidence, not out of spite, but out of necessity, because predators often return when you least expect them. Emma will grow up knowing she's loved and protected, that her parents fought for her right to stay with them, that sometimes the greatest threats come from those who claim to love you most. To any new mother facing similar manipulation, trust your instincts, document everything, and remember that your child belongs with you, not with someone who thinks they know better. Margaret taught me that motherhood isn't just about loving your child, it's about protecting them from anyone who would use that love as a weapon against you. The woman who tried to steal my baby thought she was smarter than me, more experienced, more deserving, but she underestimated the power of a mother's love and a digital recorder. Emma's first word was "Mama," and when she said it, I cried, not just from joy, but from relief that she was saying it to me in our home where she belongs. Margaret wanted to rewrite our family's story, to cast herself as the hero and me as the villain, but the recordings told the truth, and the truth set us free of this story of maternal protection. And legal justice gave you chills. Hit that like button right now. My favorite part was when the judge played Margaret's own voice back to her in court. What was your favorite moment? Drop it in the comments below for more stories of family protection and standing up to manipulation. Subscribe and tap the notification bell.